Welcome to Bridger. Welcome to Bridging Generations in Sales and Outreach. My name is Butch Nicholson, and I'm your host. This is the show for baby boomers and Gen Xers who built really successful careers uh, on relationships, but now are navigating the social media space that we're in, and how to how to take those skills that they've already learned and use them in the new environment. Uh, excuse me. So, excuse me, I'm sorry. So, I'm really excited today to have Rusk Jones on the show. Uh, I've known Russ for over 30 years. If you don't believe that, here's a picture of us probably 30 years ago doing our favorite thing, playing in a golf tournament. Uh, so Rusk is someone who is not that big of a content guy now because his business doesn't really require him to be. But knowing Rusk, knowing three successful businesses Rusk has built, I know that Rusk understands building relationships and how to get referrals from those relationships as good as well as anybody I know. So, Rusk, I'm really happy to have you on the show today, and I'm going to let you take a minute or two and introduce yourself.
Butch, well, thank you, and I'm sure this is not going to be any different than hundreds of conversations we've had, and I look forward to sharing some of the things that I know are important to you and I, and some things we talked about. But I am a entrepreneur, and I have worked for myself now for going on 36 years. And so, there's a mindset that happens with an entrepreneur that's a little different than corporate America. And I usually tell my entrepreneurial friends or friends that want to get in and become entrepreneurs is you got to be able to wake up every morning unemployed, and you have to be able to believe that you can have a great year in a day. And I don't think that's true of anything where you're in commission sales or working for yourself. And those sound simple, but it's a pretty important mindset.
I know where you heard you can have a great career in a day.
Absolutely. We
Uh,
will probably quote him more than once during this conversation. We would be speaking of the infamous Nick Nicholson, who I had the real sincere honor of working for, and that's really how I met Butch. And he was a incredibly wise and incredibly successful man who I don't think ever owned a cell phone until way past his business career. So he's the perfect example of relational selling, and much of what I do, I learned in his office on Friday afternoon.
well, thank you. I know that'll make him happy to hear that. Uh, so, Rusk, I know at least 90% of your business still comes from referrals. Uh, you're out in the marketplace all the time. You have two younger sons. Uh, why do you think it is that the younger generation is so reluctant to skip the trust building part and hop right into the sales pitch?
You know, I think it's because the very thing that we didn't grow up with. I mean, my sons are 34 and 27 and 25, and they think I grew up in the dark ages because I had no internet when I was their age, and there wasn't cell phones. And so part of trying to understand it is I believe it's so common to them. It's such a normal part of them doing business is to use technology, use their phone, and I'm not so sure that there hasn't been this dependence that has started to come to rely on it, and good and bad. But I suspect it has something to do with that, and that's just one of those generational things that I mean, you can remember your grandparents telling you stories about things you couldn't relate to. I'm sure I'm that guy now, and I'm saying things they can't relate to in some ways.
So, Rusk, I know with my daughter's a little older than your oldest son, and one of the things I've experienced with her, uh, if I want her to talk to me, call me back, I have to say, Katie, this is your father. I need to talk to you. Call me back. Um, and there's maybe a 50-50 chance she'll call me back then. Uh, but if I don't say that, I'll always get a text back. It might be 2 or 3 days later, but I'll get it. Uh, so do you think the way that they grew up, there's some reluctance to get on the phone, and even what some old guys like us might call reluctance?
Yeah, there's no question there's call reluctance in some ways, but what always is interesting to me is their generation likes relationship. They like community. And I think it's that they find their community on their iPhones a lot of times, or their chats or their Instagrams, which is why you can hardly go anywhere without seeing a younger person taking a picture of themselves or their friends. And I don't know that I'll ever be able to completely embrace that. But when you reduce that to, say, working for me and I need you to go and prospect and develop business for me, now we're moving from your personal lifestyle to I have to be in business. And to do that, I have to sell. And I don't have a product that you can go to the store and buy. It's a product in my world as a general contractor. Um, I'm either creating a plan or working from one, but it's finding the people who either generate the plan or who need a plan. That gets down to where you're not going to do that over the telephone, most likely.
So, I believe that there are probably two parts to it, and I don't believe either the older or the younger generation is wrong. I just believe that's what we both grew up with.
Yeah, I mean, call reluctance is a very real thing, and I don't care whether you're using a phone, you're not returning a text message, and I'm guilty as charged. There are times when I would rather not have an unpleasant conversation over an issue. I will text the answer. In its simplest form, that is call reluctance. That is a form of aversion to having a human conversation because I don't want to either get yelled at, or I don't want to deliver bad news, or any number of reasons. And you can extrapolate that into any industry. So I'm guilty. I'm not saying that I don't use it and I'm not using it as a crutch. I'm saying that in its purest form, you may be able to say, "Hey, I'm going to call you," but I have strong belief that the sales process is still the sales process, and we still have the same basic needs that we want met to buy something.
So, one of the one of the things that I believe we can miss too, uh, whether we're a baby boomer, whether we're a Gen Joneser, we'll talk about in a minute, a Gen Xer, a millennial, whatever some of the others are. Uh, I've always believed you have to meet the person where they are. Uh, if they want to talk on the phone, you need to talk. In fact, I was talking to somebody this week that's in the commercial real estate business, very successful. And he said, this is the first thing he finds out from a potential customer. Do you want me to deal with you on email, text messages, or phone calls?
I love that. A lot of times in my world of construction, particularly if it's me and we don't have an architect engaged yet, it's really about finding out why I'm there. In fact, that is a question that I ask almost every single time when I meet a new homeowners. I smile and I'm pleasant. I'm trying to engage with them quickly, but I just say, "Why am I here?" And then the other thing that I do is to say, "All right, if I was walking in your backyard tonight for the party at 7 o'clock, tell me what I see, tell me what I hear, tell me what I smell." And I try to get them to start to take possession of the project and share with me. And that's the basic needs analysis, right? You talk about it in your book, in ineffective relationships. You talk about building value, and one of the ways you build value is not what I need, but building value with the person or the person you're talking to. I think that starts very, very, very early in the sales, certainly a successful sales cycle. I think you can always find the genesis of that success way back in the very beginning when they do it. And to that point, you also mentioned, and it's been well documented, that only 7% of what we say is really remembered or part of the sales process. Over 93% is body language when you're connecting with people. And I would argue that somewhere in that early sales process, when you're trying to differentiate yourself, when you're trying to establish rapport early, whether it's through knowledge or presentation or product, whatever it is, if you're not presenting yourself, i.e., you're not behind a phone, then you're missing 97% of the opportunity for them to make some type of connection with you, whether it's an emotional connection, intellectual connection, whatever it is. But there has to be that connection. Otherwise, they'll just go buy from somebody else.
Yep. So when we were preparing for the show, the producer of the show, my producer for the show, I'll ask an interesting question. She said, "What's the difference between a customer and a client?"
I love that. And I actually have to give props to an old friend of ours, Steve Benedict. And, another friend of mine who was a professional drummer said, "Great artists borrow, a good artist borrow, and great artists steal." I stole this completely from Steve Benedict, who I hope he'll watch this someday. Clients and customers are wonderful because it's something that I believe strongly in, and it sounds simple, but the simple way to answer it is customers shop at Walmart, clients buy from you. And if you break that down one more level, clients get referral, customers don't give referral. And then you break it even further, customers are not brand loyal, clients are you/brand loyal. And when you look at all that together, the subtle differences comes down to trust, comes down to expertise, and we're all customers of something. And I would challenge you to ask, well, why do you use a particular barber or a particular hairdresser, or why do you shop particularly for anything that you could buy somewhere else, but you choose one particular place, brand, or location, or person? And it gets down to they either make you feel like a client, they call you a client, or you both know you're a client for a number of different reasons.
So I'm gonna I'm gonna cheat and read this because this is something that you said that I want to hear what you want to have to say about it. You said you can't sell what people need if you're only responding to what they ask for. How do you figure out what they really need?
I mean, isn't that the essence of the sales cycle? And um, we talk about the insurance business a lot. In fact, we've actually said to be a great salesman, somebody ought to really try to immerse themselves in the insurance business for a couple of years, because you're selling something they're never going to use, taste, or touch, most likely. And the question becomes how you approach the sale. And that really gets down to back to your ineffective relationships, which is your third crisis, which is what's the value that you bring. And the only way that I know to address the needs of someone in my side of the industry is you have to ask them, you have to talk to them. And that comes out in conversation. Why am I here? Sometimes there's an obvious problem. And if you see the obvious problem, then you need to then distinguish why you're the guy or team that's going to satisfy that need. I do it a number of different ways. I use our experience with high-end residential home builders. I use it on some of the prestigious corporate and commercial jobs that we were fortunate enough to be a part of. And I try to bring a level of confidence early, because my belief as I go into any type of sale is there's a reluctance to spend their money on something they don't know. I don't know that that's not true of really any high value purchase, whether it's a car, or a home, a boat, a vacation, whatever, which I think plays into your part of the whole industry with technology, which is people use reviews. I use reviews. If there's 2 reviews, that's not as powerful as 2,000, right? And I think understanding by being open to conversation is the only way that you begin to break the ice and find out why you're there. Otherwise, you're going to start blabbing and bringing things to your table that don't belong there. And the last thing I would tell a young salesman is never let your budget be the client's budget. I've seen people spend money a lot more money than I thought they were going to spend, and my expectations were low, and I walk out with a beautiful project because they keep going, and I have to remind myself, even 30 years in the business, 25, 22 years as a contractor, that could happen today. It's just a truism.
I remember the first thing that I sold to someone that they were going to pay more than what I made in a year. And I was probably 22, 23 years old, and I was scared to death. And he was an older gentleman, and he knew I was scared to death. And he bought it from me, and he told me, he said, "I'm buying this from you because you're the first one that's been brave enough to come in here and tell me how much it costs."
There you go. And I hate to keep, I actually don't hate to keep pointing to the insurance industry. There's so much that I garnered from that experience. And one of them was, we talked about it before, the financial needs analysis. And that's a tool used in the insurance business, obviously, to help understand the financial and the fiscal responsibility, the fiscal status of the house, insurance, income, kids, and so on. That same model works in, I don't know of any other industry that it wouldn't work in, particularly in the construction industry. The one thing that I try to overcome early on is this: they don't know exactly what it cost. So I try to very early on flesh out what you think the value of this is. If you think it's a $10,000 project and I think it's a $40,000 project, then we have a big gap to cover. Sometimes they think it's more and I can prove that it's going to be a little less. That's great. But for the most part, that has its genesis all the way back into very early on getting them comfortable with budgets and spending money. And there's some other things we'll talk about here that I can't explain, but they're just Nick truisms. They're insurance truisms. And I have no idea why they work, but they work universally. And we'll talk about some of that in a few minutes.
So, Rusk, one of the things that I hate to admit this, but one of the things I learned from you that you used to say, well, you still do say all the time, is find the path of least resistance. Uh, I know it's applicable to your industry because water always finds its way, the path of least resistance, whether you want it to go there or not. Uh, but I've used that over my 45-year sales career, or 40, 30 year, 5 years, ever how long I've known you. Um, and I believe that that's something that people who have built their relationships on trust, building relationships that way, uh, and are afraid or just don't want to use social media that's available, are missing. And I believe it's also true the other way. If you're just stuck behind your computer sending out information to people where they don't get to know you, you're missing the path of least resistance. So speak to that if you would.
Well, if you think about the path of least resistance, we all do it. And the surest way is, after this show, is to get a cup of coffee and sit down and ask yourself honestly why you buy some things one day at one location. And I use the gas station example because it's the easiest. You got QT on one side of the road, you got racetrack on the other side all the time. You got McDonald's on one side, you got Burger King on the other. So we have these retail rivalries all around us. And yet, if you ask yourself, why did I stop at QT going out in the morning to get coffee or gas? And why won't I cross the street and through that red light coming home and I'll wheel into racetrack to get coffee or gas? The answer is obvious. It's easy. And I don't want to be hassled with red lights and people and delays. I want to get in and get out and get home. Take that same model, and you're asking someone to buy a product or a service from you. And if you don't make it easy for them to say yes, then you're going to be troubled the whole way. You're going to constantly be in an uphill battle. And the easiest way to get them to say yes is to create a path of least resistance. That path of least resistance could be design, and I'll speak specifically to my world because it's easy for me to create an analogy. It is demonstrating they have a problem that maybe they do or do not know about. Maybe they think they understand the depth of the problem, and they need to understand the realities. It's a lot bigger than the problem they think they have. Those are ways to build confidence, and confidence is part of this path of least resistance, which circles right back into, are you going to have a customer out of this person or a client? If you're going to make a client out of them, then you have to establish the trust relationship early, and you have to do it by competence in my world. And you see bad installations, you see bad results, and sometimes you have to politely tell the homeowner, this was just a bad job, and I'm going to have to fix it, and I can't fix it without tearing it apart. So in another world, it might be auto sales, path of least resistance. Maybe it's finance, maybe it's availability, maybe it's client care. You can go on and on and on and on. But at the end of the day, every single one of us buys something or a litany of things because it's easy. And I think the challenge with social media is everyone's taken over the let me tell you who I am space. Okay, so it's not easy anymore to decide whether Butch is an AI image or he's real. Is Butch's product better than Rusk's product? That used to be easy because there wasn't that many. Now, as soon as you say, I wonder what Butch's product's all about, 52 emails will come in or 52 pop-ups will come in because AI saw you do it. So now path of least resistance to just know if I like what Butch does is difficult. So how are you going to convince me that you're still the easy best solution? And I think that gets into your world. And my world is still people. And people still get up and do the same things they've done for thousands of years. They eat, they go to bed, they sleep, they get tired, they go to work. And in your world, you've got this changing third party who's introducing and interjecting themselves into my world. And I didn't ask them to talk to me, but here they are. I wanted to talk to Butch, and now I got to undelete all these other people. And I think that's a very interesting and troublesome place to be in some people's worlds.
So, Russ, let me ask you this, because I know you've done a great job of this, whether it was consciously or unconsciously. But we all need to be known. I mean, if you're going to make it big in whatever business we're in, we have to be known. We have to be visible. People that we don't know need to know who we are. The easy default way to do that, if it works, is things like LinkedIn, producing content, valuable content wherever it is. That's applicable in my world. It's not applicable in your world. But still, in your world, you need people that you know need to know who you really are, and people that you don't know need to know that you're an expert at what you do. So, tell me how that works in your world now.
You know, it's interesting because I have a lot of friends on LinkedIn, and I think the few builders that I know that are there, you know, they want to show their projects, and I think that's a good space. But LinkedIn's more, as you know, because you're a subject matter expert on that, and I'm not, to be honest with you. It's the relational side, it's the connection side, it's the B2B side. I've been approached for years and years by the radio industry to advertise what we do, and I try to remind them to use their own vernacular. The theater of the mind does not work with what I do. People need to see something, and they need to say, that's my problem, or I've always wanted one of those. So when I advertise, I use print media. And I use print media, and I don't show anything inexpensive in my print media. I only show high value, high quality products. And then occasionally I'll show a disaster and a fix. And it might be that it's the season, the summer, the weather, whatever it is that I'm advertising that particular need for. But the way that you have to identify what you do sometimes is to create a problem or to get them to realize now their problem needs to be acted on. And I do that through print media. And I believe that when people see it, they either walk away going, well, it looks pretty good, I want one. And I've had people call me and look at a ad that I ran. And the guy says, I'm looking at your ad and I want that back porch. I said, are you talking about the one with the fireplace and so on? He goes, yeah. And I would go, right. And I've said these exact words. That back porch is $60,000. Is that what you're thinking about spending? And you get to the budget real quick that way. But it's more about, this is what I want, or I've always wanted. Can you come see if I can have one? That's a good space for us for what we do.
Hey, Rusk, you and I didn't talk about this for this show, but you just said something uh, that, regardless of age, regardless of experience, regardless of what you're selling, uh, I have found that people in sales they waste more time because of this reason. You just said, okay, that's a $60,000 back porch. You still want one. And you saved a ton of time because if he said no, you could hang up. And I believe salespeople waste tons of time because they're scared to talk about budget.
100% agree. If there's one thing I could teach, and I would tell a young salesperson with me, is watch how quickly I introduce cost into this. Now, some of that's experience. I can walk on a job and you have a sense of what the problem is. You can run some rough numbers in your head. You're going to need this much of this much of that, blah, 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 blah. And I can say, look, what I do is I throw out a number that should scare them if they think it's low. I will say, look, this is a $35,000 or $40,000 fix. Is that what you're thinking? That's a first call conversation. Back to technology, the way I do it is I would say, Mr. Nicholson, thank you for calling me. Can you send me, if I have a suspicion that I don't want to drive an hour to go visit your yard, can you send me a picture? Yeah. So I don't want to say I don't use technology because you just saved me 3 hours of my day by saying, sure. And I said, just walk out there and turn your camera on. Let me see it. And we'll talk on the phone. And then I'll ask the same thing. Based on what I see, you're probably in this world. Is that what you're thinking? That's kind of my standard line. But I mean, how many times in the insurance business have you seen guys walk away? And what was one of the Nick things? If you don't get a check, you don't have a policy.
So, so where do you think that fear comes from of saying, and it doesn't matter what it is, saying this is $50 or this is $50,000?
It has to be rooted into it's got to be something in the self-confidence um, aspect of it. You feel like there's something in the call that they don't want to talk about, or you're afraid to ask, or you're afraid you're going to be too low. And my advice is don't get specific, but get it into the conversation, because the worst thing that can happen, and this happened to me early in my career, was it when you don't ask for a right budget. You got the idea in your head, you go meet Mr. Nicholson, you prepare a beautiful proposal, you present him with 25, 30, 40, 50,000, whatever it is. I mean, I've had clients spend $1 million with me, so I don't want to put limits on it because it happens at every single level. And I enjoy to this day being in someone's backyard who wants to spend $10,000 or $15,000 because it's important to them. It's hard-earned money. It's not throwaway money. It's important money, and that makes me feel good about what I'm getting ready to do. But when you're there, if you're not talking about that budget, if you're not introducing that concept, you'll develop a proposal. You'll spend hours doing it, perhaps. You'll present it to Mr. Nicholson for $40,000, and he'll look at you and either say, I thought it was going to be 20, deal over, you're done. Or, oh, my neighbor's brother is in the business and he's going to do it for me. If you don't cover those bases early on, you're going to get wasted time. And you and I know at some point, and I love the way you talk about it in your book early on. You talk about life work balance early. And it's like, are you a slave to your job, or is your job a result of a good, healthy relationship at home? And you and I both agree that it's not work first. Work is a byproduct of loving and working with your family. And if you get into that mindset, you need to realize that your time is all you have, right? And if you're going to waste it, then you're going to give up something else. As Andy Stanley wrote in his book, you're going to have to choose to cheat something else. What are you going to cheat? If you spent 3 hours on something that should have never taken you more than an hour, somebody or something, you or someone, got cheated. And time is money.
So, Russ, let me ask you, one other thing that we talked about, and to be honest, I had never thought about this being a way to show ourselves, to show how we care about what we do, show about how we care about our customers. I know you have a son that's not your oldest son, the middle son, who is maybe getting into your business. I know you talked to him about a lot about the credibility of certifications.
Yeah, younger generation, and I mean that as a term of endearment. It's just everybody's younger generation than me. It seems it's getting there anyways. Um, the modern or younger generation, I think, back to our early conversation, tends to place a higher value on maybe a social media post or something, as opposed to what I like to refer to as street creds. And as I'm bringing my son into the business, I remind him, look, you're a good looking, polite young man, but you got no skills in this particular industry. And what I'm getting ready to connect you to is 20 years of relationships. And as part of that, I need you to go get certified. In this particular case, it was epoxy. And I said, when I got into the business, I didn't know how to install pavers. I was selling pavers with, fortunately, ultimately my business partner, who was brilliant. But I was selling pavers based on what I believed his brilliance was. And I happened to be right in that case, but I could have been very, very wrong. And I went and got what's called ICPI certification, which is a industry certification. And what it meant was I don't necessarily install pavers, but I understand how to install pavers. I used that to not only break the ice with clients, but it was my own security blanket. I felt like if I really knew how to do it, I could talk about it. And if I really knew my product, I would understand the cost of it. And I'd know when to say no in the sales process. I'd know that that's what it really cost me, and I'm not going to work for free. One of my favorite lines that I've said for 30 years is, I will pay to fish, I'll pay to go hunting, and I'll pay to play golf, but I ain't paying to go to work. And when you don't know your cost, you will pay to go to work one day, and it is not fun. And the only way to do that is to educate yourself, learn your product. And I would say if you're an employee working for someone, learn your craft, learn your product. Um, Not everything's going to be done on a telephone. You're going to meet somebody at a party or a outing or a show, and you're going to need to be able to do what you talk about in your book, the 30-second elevator pitch. You're going to have to be able to very quickly. I think you use an example of, in 10 words, tell me what your goals are. If you can't do that, then either you're not being representative of your own company or you're the company that you work for in a way that you could be, I guess.
So this hopped into my head while we were talking here. In our business, we want the people that we deal with, the CEOs, the sales leaders, to be known to their industry and known to the customers of our industry. And somebody asked me once, well, what does that mean to be known? And I thought, I haven't thought about that. And then I gave it some thought, and I said, this is what I think it means to be known. If there's a person, a man or a woman, who is going to be on a podcast, you're going to make time to watch that podcast because you want to know what they say. If that person is making a talk in your town and you have access to going, you're going to go because you want to hear what that person has to say. Talk now. Instead, we've been kind of talking to the younger generation. Let's talk to the older generation. You've got somebody, and let's take away industry here because the industry doesn't matter. You've got a CEO, you've got a sales leader, and they're complete. They're great at old school. They're as good as you are at old school, but they don't know how to translate to what's going on now. How would you, for lack of a better word, how would you coach them on using the skills they have today, given what they have?
What do they want to use the skills for? Help me out there a little bit.
To be known.
To be known. I would say one of the first things, and one of the things that's been most satisfying to me, is to get involved in charitable organizational work. Um, I I made a decision to do things that did not have the ability for anybody to pay me back. I did it because I wanted to give, and I'm a believer. I'm a follower of Christ for 30 years. I make no bones about it, and so I have believed that too much is given, much is expected. And I would say to the CEO, if you want to experience joy and you want to experience the fruit of the gift that God has given you, man or woman, doesn't make any difference. Give it away. Give it away. Help someone, help an organization that needs to hear your wisdom. Help someone who has no ability to pay you back, which you should not expect to be paid back. You should give freely. There is a peace and joy that comes from the realization of, wow, man, I'm so thankful that I have never had to do that. And you'll find that there's a compassion level, there's a giving level, there's a not focus on me level, which I love. And I keep talking about your book, but one of the most important parts of that whole book is in the fifth crises, the metacognition. I love that term because it is a complete and total awareness of yourself. You got to understand your emotions. You got to understand your thoughts compared to your actions. Um, in our age, people can't buy the time that Rusk and Butch and others have spent doing what we're doing. And it's not our successes that are always the most important thing. Sometimes it's the miserable failure that we experienced that we say, look, I know the path you're walking on, and I have walked it, and I know where it ends. And for me personally, that was a divorce over 33 years ago. I can smell one coming. I've been married now for 32 years. And it's knowing what's the path that they're on is going to lead them to that. And I say, I wouldn't do it again. That's just a simple example, but giving away, using what you know, um, empowering somebody else. There's a joy in watching somebody's light come on because of a simple truth that you learned years ago and probably learned it from somebody else yourself.
Uh, so I don't want people and the people watching the show today to think that everything in our lives has been rainbows and butterflies. I can assure you of this: Rusk and I both have had some very high highs, and we both had some very low lows. And I believe you would agree with me. The low lows are where you really learn if you survive them, and they're well worth surviving.
Without question. And it's life. And that's when relationships, friendships, you come along somebody if you're not in the same place at the same time, and you and I haven't always been at the same place at the same time, and there's a relationship that you and I've developed over 30 years, and I think it's worth mentioning when we first met each other, we were in different worlds. We liked to play golf and we enjoyed each other's company, but we didn't socialize, and yet we, through friendship and riding around in the old 535 BMW with the spilled cheese on the floor, riding around, there was something that started to connect us as friends. And when the time that the proverbial crap hit the fan, one of us was there for the other one in any number of ways. And I think that comes from the relational side of anything in life because it's not always your friends. And 65, I've had some ups and downs, and I try to avoid them. I tell people I now know way before I get home that I'm going to get in trouble, and so I have a chance to to either not, to dodge the issue or run earlier.
So, Russ, as we wrap up, I would, as far as how we relate to other people, how we build trust, how we build uh, people knowing who we build our profile, we build our image. Uh, what I got from you today is consistency, trust, and conversation.
Yeah, for sure. It's I just enjoy people. I enjoy people's stories, and The challenge you have when someone has a pretty high personality like mine is listening and not cutting people off. And I wish I could say I mastered that. I've never mastered it. I consciously have to sometimes sit and go, just stop. And it's just a habit, but it's a habit that as long as you're aware of it, you can control it a little bit. But it masks a gift, and that's I love people. And I think as we look at the AI, and I don't want to act like I don't use it. Of course, I use it. I am a big believer on being a possessor of knowledge and not a finder of knowledge. And in order to do that, at some point, you have to digest and think about what it is you're doing and how you're going to use this amazing tool called AI. And in the construction business, I see other people who use it. They use it in the drawings, and they use it in codes and things like that. But at the end of the day, it as you say, it still comes back to personality and that one-on-one. And I think I think people would do well to introduce more of that time or to pay attention to the time and maybe go have lunch with their friend Butch and just put like we do, put the phone down. Just turn it off and sit down and have a cigar or a cup of coffee or whatever it is you're going to do. Take the phone and put it away and start the process of doing it. And then I love what you said years ago. Pay attention to people you don't notice. That sounds simple. I've never forgot it. It's been 20 years. And it's an awareness. And what it does is it keeps you from looking in and it keeps you looking out to see what's around you. And it's not always a sales opportunity. It might be opening a door for somebody. It might be helping a mom get her groceries in the car. It might be catching a kid who broke free in the parking lot. All those things happen that you would not be aware of, that you may never hear from her again, but you may change the way she handles that day or the way she approaches that problem in the next hour because of an act of kindness or just an awareness. We all want to be known, right? Dale Carnegie says the most powerful name in the world is your own. It's the one you want to hear the most. And one of the things he says in his book is use someone's name 3 times in the first minute that you meet them, and you will develop a relationship that goes way beyond because you're talking to the thing they love to hear most, and that's their name.
Well, thanks, Rusk. I appreciate you being on here today. What I would tell you, whether you're the older generation, you're the younger generation, you don't need to be an influencer. Nothing bad with influencers, but if you're in another business, you don't need to be an influencer. You need to be remembered, and there are different ways to do that depending on where you come from. Rusk is certainly somebody that what he's best at is being remembered. So I appreciate you being on the show today. We have 2 questions that we wrap up with here. One is a little serious, and one can be or not. So what would Rusk today tell Rusk of 20 years ago today?
Be quiet, listen more. It would be number one. I think that above all is be a good listener. You learn so much more about people by just listening, and they tell you more.
I'm going to hop back into what we were talking about for a second because you reminded me with that. But one thing I 100% believe is that buyers will tell you why they'll buy if you just listen.
Yeah, and the part 2 of that was I say keep educating yourself, whether it's in the insurance business, CLU, CHFC, Series 6, 7, all those things. I think that gets into your goal setting aspect of your book, which is really early on. It's the autopilot, you call it, goal setting, and striving and realistic goals. And it's something that's not taught much anymore. And when I look back on my life in various ways, I've always set goals, and some more very specific than others, some by accident. I think I'm a lot more intentional in my goals now, and I would tell the older Rusk, be intentional about what it is you want to do, and avoid some of the serpentine roads that you traveled, and you might get a little straighter.
All right, this is the last question, and I was listening to a podcast probably 6 months ago, and the guy that runs the podcast, his last thing he asked on his show every time is, what is your rule for life you never break? And the day I was listening to it, the person said, never eat sushi from a gas station, which is a pretty good rule to never break. So this can be something serious. It can be something funny. What's one rule you never break?
I would say God, that's a good one. There's several rules. I would say
you only get one.
Okay. Keep my head down. Keep my head down on the golf course. I'm pretty good at that. I don't top many golf balls. I never break that rule.
Keep that right hip turning and not freezing.
You gotta keep it.
All right. Rusk, I appreciate you being on today. You and I've had this conversation 1,000 times, and it's always fun. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, if you want to build something, go to waypointconstructiongroup.com. Good portfolio there, and you can see a lot of different things that we've done. There's a few podcasts on there, little short ones, just talk about things that you might need to think about. And then, of course, you can always email me, Rusk, R-U-S-K, at waypointconstruction.com, and I'll always call you back. Just say I heard about you on Butch's show, and I'll bounce right back.
Thanks, Rusk. Appreciate you being on today. So you can reach me in the show notes. You can reach me online. You can even give me a call if you want to. Let me tell you this: if we can help you, we will. And I'm sure Rusk is the same way with this. If we can't help you, we'll tell you we can't help you. And chances are we've been around for a while, and we probably know somebody who can, and we'll be happy for you to refer them. So appreciate you watching Bridging Generations in Sales and Outreach. And you can catch us on YouTube. You can catch us on Instagram. And we'll be back next Friday at 10 a.m.